I stumbled across your website about ghost hauntings and thought my current story could be handy. Firstly, I live in a little town and village at one of the most southern parts in Australia, along the SC coast. I'm 21 years old, never touched a single bad drug in my life except alcohol, and have no family with mental illness in my bloodline. About 4 months ago, I was reading my book in bed, and the lights were on. My dog was on the bed with me. Suddenly, at approximately 11 p.m., I heard a clap at the end of my bed, and the room went sorta cold. Suddenly, I heard a breathing hovering at the end of my bed, like something was watching me. I saw the dog growling at it. I checked outside to see if anything was out the window. Nothing could explain this demonic-sounding breathing that grew louder and was getting slowly closer to me. As I was creeped out, I went on to my sister's room and was explaining what was happening when all of a sudden it was behind me, right next to my ear. It went into my sister's room, and this time it got extremely loud. She started crying and hiding under her boyfriend's arm. It stopped and went away. For the next week, I started to notice whenever I walked into different buildings, the power would fade in and out for a second. Everywhere I went. I put it down as coincidence until it just became too much of a coincidence. Also, at one point in this week, I swear I heard a demonic voice in the living room saying something I could not understand. I told it to leave. After a while, things stopped, and 2 months after the first incident, I was laying in bed one morning where suddenly I froze. I was trying to send a text message, and from what I recall, the writing changed. I was trying to read it, but my vision blurred, my body was shaking, and I could not speak. I definitely was not religious, but I was praying subconsciously. It was really intense. This lasted about 2 seconds, 2 months later, and it's up to today, on Monday. On Friday night, my mate stayed over. My dog was on my bed once again. I heard my dog growling at something, and based on past experiences, I decided to just roll the other way and sort of just block out everything. My mate, on the other hand, was scared to death, as he told me the next morning that a really bad presence was in the room. He said he just could feel it. It was suddenly cold, and he said breathing came from the hallway, got louder, and went into my bathroom, which is when the dog started to growl. It stuck around for about 2 minutes. My mate was too scared to move, and didn't even tell me it was happening. Last Sunday, possibly the most intense thing happened at around 4:30 a.m. I went to turn the DVD player off with the remote. I accidentally fell asleep with it on, and then rolled onto my left side. Out of nowhere, wind was rapidly blowing in the room. It was a harsh, freezing cold wind, blowing on my face as I was covered by my blanket. A very deep, dark, but clearer than usual voice echoed in my right ear. It was saying something in a totally foreign language I had never heard like before. I could not control my body at this time. I was frozen into my bed and could not speak. I was trying to recite a prayer that my mate's dad, who is a priest, told me to say if shit ever went down. I could only mumble it, and this time it snapped out, and I yelled the word God subconsciously. The room became so still. It was daunting. I like to consider myself to be very logical and usually skeptical. I never would have believed such stories in the past, but now that I've experienced it and have heard so many stories of my friends doing seances and stuff, I think it's legit. I do not believe this to be a human spirit. I actually believe it to be some form of bad spirit or a demon. I still am not a religious person. However, I now believe in the unseen. I hope to get some much needed sleep now. I've had slight hauntings all my life. Just little things that I'm sure mostly everyone has had happen to them. That is until my family moved into a home in De Pere, Wisconsin. The home is an area rich with history. It is supposedly where the last Dufresne was found. I've heard stories from other people whom lived in this area, and a lot of them have problems with their homes as well. Here is my story. We moved into the home when I was about 13 years old. At first, we loved the house and how big it was, but in the first few minutes of running through it, I could almost sense something was really odd about the house. It was just a spooky feeling that I had when entering some of the rooms. Our dog would freak out a lot and bark at imaginary things and would refuse to enter some rooms. Our friend would refuse to spend the night because they felt something evil in the home, and some claimed to see demons and shadow people. I came home to find my best friend sitting on my porch shaking and crying. She told me that she was in my bedroom and heard my mother's bedroom door slam shut. She went to investigate and found that there was no reason for the door to slam like it did. So, she opened the door and set a heavy clothes basket in between the door frame and the door itself. She left the area, only to hear the door slam shut 5 seconds later. She went back and found the clothes basket had been flung inside of the room. We also had an unusual fire that should have killed all of us, but for some reason, I woke up to discover its TVs would flip on and off by themselves also. Alarm clocks would never stop the correct time either. I almost felt like the house had a good and evil battle going on with it, and we were caught in the crossfire. My sister and her friends would hear moaning noises a lot too. We finally told her mother that we needed to move, and she did not put up a fight. The day we moved out, she confessed to us that when she was sleeping, she would wake up to a feeling like someone was sitting on her and strangling her. She even felt the fingers once. When we got to our new house, the neighbors came over to greet us. They asked where we had just moved from. We gave them the address, and they got all very pale and told us that they too had lived in the same house and asked us if we had any problems living there. We compared stories, and almost everything was the same. The home is almost always for sale or rent. It just seems nobody wants to stay in it for very long. I did meet the current owner once, and he told me he has had no problems with the home, but I'm sure that he either is not noticing, or maybe the demons have finally left. It just seems like every home I lived in has the same little type of hauntings with it, or I'm just sensitive to that kind of energy, which I could live without. I have many things I could post here, but some I'm not ready to share yet. Hello, my name is Tiffany, and I have some uncertainties maybe you can clear up for me. When I was 6 years of age, my father was killed in a car accident on his way to work. To this day, I strongly feel his spirit remains with me. For the record, I love my father dearly, still do, and miss him so much. In the spring of 1992, as a class project for our psychology class, we had to take notes that night of the dream we had, if one was had, and share it with the class the next day. I still to this day cannot decipher if what I had was a dream or a near-death experience. I dreamt I sat in this tunnel. It had all my favorite childhood memories within it, my stuffed bear, my ball, my favorite tricycle, etc. Also in that tunnel was my father, dressed in a white gown, sitting on a chair. I knelt down next to him and listened to him tell me, "Tiffany, I love you, and I need you to understand this is not your time." I told him that I loved him and missed him so much, but he told me that I couldn't go, because then I couldn't tell my mom what he wanted me to share with her. He told me, "I understand you miss me, but you have to understand that one day we will all be together, and that time is not now. You have to let your mother know how much I miss her and care about her, as well as the rest of you. I have 6 siblings. The light in this tunnel was absolutely beautiful. I've never seen anything like it before. As I was drifting away from him in the dream, I was waking up, sobbing uncontrollably. Of course, I had to go and share this with my mom, and she was speechless. Since then, I've only had one other dream with my dad and siblings in it. Of course, real as ever, and again, so upset I couldn't be with them. I'm just not so sure if the first one was an actual dream, out-of-body experience, or near-death experience. It was just amazing. My second experience, when I was 20 to 21, I became pregnant. I lived with my cousin and her boyfriend in Ballsville, New York, in an apartment on Downer Street. One night, while I was close to my expecting date, I woke up to a woman without a face in a white gown, almost like a nun sitting at the end of my bed. When I sat up, she immediately disappeared. She showed up a few times after, almost as though she was watching over me. It didn't matter if I moved my bed from one side of the room to the other. she still found her way. To this current day, I still feel like I have family who have passed on watching over me. I've been told I have an older man, usually sitting at my kitchen table with a cigarette in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, which sounds much like my grandfather. I can't tell you how many times my fiance, 2 older sons, and myself have put our cell phones, digital camera, flashlights, anything with batteries on the kitchen counter, and within hours, the batteries are almost drained. We don't place these items up there as often as we used to. Many times when family is going to pass on, see the individual in a dream the night before, and that's when I know their time has come. I've had dreams which include the dead meant for other people, and let me tell you, they physically drain me. Oh my god. Sometimes it's fun though. When relaying the message to the rightful person and seeing their expression when I tell them something I have previous knowledge of and don't know what it means, but they have an understanding. It is just amazing. It seems to bring relief to them. I don't know if you can sort any of this out, or if any of this makes sense to you, but I know this stuff has happened to me, and it doesn't scare me. It seems like more of a wake-up call. Thank you for your time, and have a great evening. Thank you for listening as well. I sincerely appreciate it. My children and I had a very bad experience with the demon in a house that we lived in. My son became very scared one night as he viewed a ghost of a man with a sword sticking out of its side. This ghost was standing in the doorway of my son's bedroom very late one night. He said this thing was just giving him the feeling of such terrible dread and hatred. It made my son feel like it was going to kill us. My son started sleeping in my daughter's bedroom, and that thing started going from room to room, looking for my son, and so it started coming into our room and scaring the daylights out of me. I felt the hatred and anger. I know that it would have killed us if we had not gotten our pastor out there to help us. When our pastor pulled into our drive, he said he felt the anger and hatred just emanating from the house to the outside. He knew what we were up against, and we immediately started saying prayers to Jesus and his army of saints to fight for us. It ended up working so well that while we were living there, we had no more problems. But whenever we drive by, we cannot even look at the house. I know this was a short one, but I appreciate you listening. Hi, my name is Diane. Growing up in Detroit, my family lived in a house that was haunted. On several occasions, my whole family would hear loud crashes that could only be described as boxes of dishes being smashed. Everyone in my family experienced several ghost contacts in one form or another. On 3 different occasions with 3 different family members, a man about 60 was seen wearing a plaid flannel shirt. This man mainly stood there looking at the person, never attempted communication or harm. I was about 8 when he appeared, and I was the first one to see him. Although my sister, who was 7 years older than me, was not present. I tell this to you now, so later you will understand. My relatives from out of town were visiting, and the adults were sitting in the living room after dinner. I was extremely quiet in the hopes that only a child can have, that they would forget that I was there. I was sitting on the couch and the front door was open, with the screen door closed. I saw the man wearing a red plaid shirt, staying at the front door looking in. I told my family, and they thought I was overtired and put me to bed. Later that same week, my older sister was getting into the shower when she saw a man in a red plaid shirt standing in the bathroom with her. She freaked out and told my mother, who this time listened more closely. She then revealed that she too had seen the man in the red shirt standing in the kitchen by the sink, looking like he was getting a glass of water. All family members routinely heard footsteps throughout the house, especially going up the stairs into an attic bedroom. The steps would continue across the floor. All my family members experienced this together and separate on several different occasions. My sister's, whose bedroom it was for a while, admitted she was scared to sleep in that room and was frightened very often, thinking that someone was coming into her room. I later had that same bedroom and became so afraid of it that I began sleeping on the living room sofa. On several occasions, dishes in the house would break when put in a certain china cabinet, and on 2 separate occasions, a silver meat platter in the china cabinet whose doors were kept closed, flew across the room at my mother. Lights turned off in the basement would be on when we would wake up every morning. The dryer would routinely come on by itself, and even after the electric was checked out, this still continued. The basement had an old coal room that had been converted into a storage room with paint cans and stuff. This room had a negative feeling, and no one in the family liked to even go in there. Likewise, no one in the family wanted to go under the stairs, although no one had a mysterious occurrence in those places. Every family member in that house had heard their name called on different occasions many times when they were home alone. One occasion comes to mind. My father, who was home alone, was working in the basement. My mother, sister, and I were out shopping at the mall. He distinctly heard the front door open, even though it was locked, and someone walked across the living room and the kitchen. He walked upstairs and found the front door locked, as he knew he would. It was then that someone called his name. He answered, and no one said anything after that. Another all-family experience came when we all went to visit my grandmother who lived across town. We even brought the family dog. We were returning home, and as we pulled into the driveway, I saw the drapes move back like someone was watching us return. I said, "Did you see that?" And my father countered, "What did you see?" I told him, and he and my mother and sister agreed that this is what they saw too. My dad went into the house first while we waited in the car. Everything was just as we left it with the doors locked. On one occasion, I awoke to having a woman staying at the foot of my bed. She disappeared as soon as I got a good look at her. Her name was Anne. She said she had lived in that house. No one in that house ever saw Anne again. This house had an addition that was a former dining room off the back. It had built-in china cabinets that would fly open on no occasion, even after my mother put hooks on them, thinking the wood was swelling. Music was often heard playing softly. In all, it was a weird place to live, and we were all very glad to move, but we did live there over 20 years. My parents moved into an apartment, as I did in a different location, while staying with them because I had become extremely ill. I had a unique experience of a ghost nurse who took care of me. My parents were asleep, and I was lying on the sofa, so hot but lucid. I could hear them snoring from the bedroom. I heard soft whispers shuffle across the floor and felt a cold hand lovingly touch my forehead, checking my fever, a comfort. I was not afraid really, and somehow thought Grandma is here, but I had no evidence of this. I remember keeping my eyes closed, just knowing my nurse did not want me to see her. I was very conscious of my parents snoring and knew it was not them. When the feet shuffled off, I opened my eyes and got up and looked at my parents. They were sound asleep. The whole situation lasted maybe 2 minutes, yet I started to improve that night. Hi, I don't have any pictures or sound files, but I just wanted to share my story, and maybe you can give me an idea of what on earth I saw. When I was 6, I shared a room with my older brother. He was fast asleep, but I couldn't resist. I remember tossing and turning. I had this toy closet with a short door on it. I looked at the door and saw a large hole in it. It was black with no real shape, and it had a hole in the middle of it, the only spot that wasn't black. Anyway, I get up and shake the curtains, trying to see if it was a shadow. I put my hand in front of it. I move my toys and dolls. What is making the shadow, I thought. I stood in front of it and just stared, and then moved off the door and just hovered in front of me. Now, this is where it sounds really stupid, but remember, I was only a kid. I asked if it wanted to play chess. I was frightened, but didn't know what else to do. I turned and ran and looked, seeing it coming from behind me. I look up at my door. My room had no door, just an opening, and there was a black shadowy figure, like the smaller one, but in the shape of a very, very tall man. He was blocking my way out, but I didn't care. I ran through him and into my parents' room, under their covers, and never peeked out. Years later, when I was around 14, my best friend spent the night with me in that same room, and told me she woke up around 5 a.m. to see a tall, shadowy man looking down at us in the darkness. She thought it was my father. My father never comes up into my room. He never has. I know this is real. I wasn't dreaming or just imagining things. Have you ever heard a story similar to this before about a black figure that changed shape? I've never seen them since, but I'm still curious. After reading some of the experience others have shared, I wanted to highlight a few of my own. I tend to be very observant of activity around me, whether I see it or not. Some people think it's an overactive imagination, but if they felt and saw some of the things I have, they would think otherwise. I guess my first experience would have to begin with what I consider my guardian angel. To start off, I lived in a fairly average house of 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, which was built in 1960. There were no previous owners. My room was at the end of a long hallway with my parents right next to it, quite convenient for late night toilets. When I was around 6 years old, I had my first experience with a world other than my own. I remember it so clearly. I'd been asleep and had a disturbing dream. I woke up, about to call for my mother. At the time, my bed was on the opposite wall of the door, and I could see my parents' room and most of the hallway. Before I called out what I saw, what I thought was my mother came into the room. I had a distinct feeling of peace immediately. I saw her clearly wearing her bathrobe with the blue and white stripe down the center and rollers in her hair. She walked into the room and up the length of my bed. When she reached the head of the bed, I put out my hand to her and felt nothing but cool air. She just looked down, smiled, and vanished. It did not frighten me that she was gone, just the opposite. I felt relieved and immediately fell asleep. The next morning, when I woke, I saw my mother in the living room and noticed that she did not have any rollers in her hair. I asked if she had worn anything the night before, and she said no. I then asked if she had come into my room that night, and again, the answer was no. I did not say anything further in case she would say I was just dreaming. I knew then, as I do now, that I was not dreaming. It wasn't until a few years later that I told her when another strange thing happened to me as I lay in bed. I was about 15 at the time and still having trouble sleeping. My room had since been rearranged differently, with the head of my bed moved to the diagonal corner from my door, still viewing my parents' room. As I lay waiting for sleep to take me, I had the strangest feeling overcome me. This has happened twice since. I was laying on my side, staring at the opposite wall, when my vision began to tunnel. I felt my body began to go numb and could hear, distinctly, my heartbeat slow. At first I thought I was slowly falling asleep, until I realized that I was very much awake. I was still staring at the wall, and I could make out my hand laying in front of me. I tried to move but could not. I tried to call out and could not. I thought I was dying. I could still hear my heart slow and was watching as my eyesight dimmed. Just before all that went black, I heard a distinct voice, which I thought was my mother, call my name. I heard it several times before my body and mind were together again. As soon as I could move, I sat up to see if my mother was in the room. She was not. I then went into my parents' room, where both were sound asleep. I was extremely perplexed and exhausted after the ordeal. The next morning, I told my mother about the night before and about the time I was 6. She told me that it must have been my guardian angel, coming in a form that was soothing to me. I've now been to college twice and had other strange activity that did and did not include my angel. That can go for another time. And never forget that the young are always prone to see and hear what we cannot, because they are more open to the world than elders. It's not always an overactive imagination either. Thanks for reading. I've only had one paranormal experience. It happened last October when my boyfriend had temporarily rented a trailer. We had lived there for almost 2 months and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. One afternoon, he decided to take a nap and I was in the living room watching TV. I started hearing this really strange continuous screeching noise. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall beside his bedroom door. When I walked over there, it stopped. I sat back down and started watching TV again, and it started back again. This time, I walked into the kitchen. The bedroom was right beside the kitchen, and I started opening the bottom cabinets, and once again, the screeching stopped. I never said anything about it to my boyfriend because I didn't think a lot about it at the time. A couple of days later, we were in the kitchen eating breakfast, and he told me that the day before, when he was there by himself, that he heard a weird, loud screeching noise. He said he tried to find it where it was coming from, and it would not stop when he'd look. I told him that the same thing had happened to me while he was asleep a few days earlier. We both talked about ghosts and laughed about it, pretty much dismissing it as a joke. A few minutes later, his mom came and stayed all night and was asleep on the living room couch. This particular night, we were sleeping in the bedroom on the opposite end of the trailer. It was really late, probably around 3 a.m., and we had been laying there talking when I started hearing this noise. It was kind of like the screeching, but much quieter, and screeched at intervals, like footsteps. I thought my boyfriend had his hand dropped over the side of the bed, making that noise with his hand against the plastic on the mattress. I said, "Brian, quit making that noise." He said, "I'm not making that noise," and held up both of his hands. He looked at me as scared as I looked back at him and said, "Get up and get dressed." As soon as he said that, you could actually tell where the screeching was moving through the room to the corner beside the bed and feel this undescribable presence, and all of a sudden, the screeching just went crazy and so loud. It was right there. Needless to say, within a split second, it was the only one there. Now, can you imagine 2 grown adults running into the living room to wake up his mom? She said she hadn't heard anything, but that we scared her to death running through the living room at 3 a.m. in the morning like we were on fire. We sat up in the living room for the rest of the night and moved back to his mom's house within the week. So far, that's the only experience that I've had. I'm the only one in my family who believes in ghosts. I have plenty of reasons too. Many of these experiences I've never spoken of to anybody until now. My friends and family wouldn't believe me if I began to tell them, because I have so many different experiences with what I believe are ghosts. I think I'm meant to know of them. I feel like I have a connection with the dead. All of this probably sounds pretty unbelievable, especially coming from someone as young as I am, but it all happened. When I was very young, like maybe 3, I remember being watched. I remember shadows by the closet door. I think it was the shadow of a man. He watched me every night. Usually, he would just stand there. Once or twice, he would move towards me, and I ran into my parents' room, where they would let me stay. The shadow followed me into that room too, but I felt safe with my parents. For the next couple of years, I don't remember much. When I was 5, I lived on a farm in Nebraska. It was a really quiet area. I remember seeing a young woman, late teens, early 20s, running through the woods, laughing and giggling. If any of my experiences were to be blamed on my imagination, it would be this one. Though it was only my imagination, I don't understand how it appeared in my memory with such vivid detail. Later that year, I moved back to my home state, Virginia. Virginia is a pretty amazing state. It is one of the first places people came to when they discovered America, and it is also full of historical sites from both the Revolutionary War and Civil War, many battlefields and cemeteries. Anyway, when I first moved back there, my mother, my brother, and I were staying with my grandparents. It's a pretty old brick house. Before my grandparents moved into it, it was owned by my great aunt Clara. Ever since the first time I stepped into my grandma and grandpa's bedroom, I always get the chills. Even now, I dread going in there alone. When I was younger, the eyes of the picture of Aunt Clara would follow me. They would follow me across the room. My brother has always been just as scared of the room as I have. He would never tell anybody why. To this day, he refuses to go into the room. I remember the scariest was when I was 5. I was napping on Grandma's bed, and I was dreaming about Great Aunt Clara. All I remember about the dream was that she was wearing all black, and she was reaching out to me. I woke up sweating, The room was so dark, but I made out her figure standing at the front of the bed, reaching out to me like in a dream. I got up and ran out of the room and into the dining room, where I was pushed headfirst into the leg of the large solid dining room table. I turned to see who had pushed me, and nobody was there. I had to go to the emergency room for stitches in my forehead. I never told anybody about seeing her because nobody would have believed me. Shortly after, we moved. And this one goes out to all the little trolls who wanted a 30-minute special of my annoying voice. Haha. Hey, guys, what's up? PhantomOfDarkness is here, and I've got a little shout out to make before I end this video. Now I'm gonna butcher her name probably, but her name is Gokchi Urkan. She's been a very special subscriber of mine for a long time, and I just want to wish her a happy birthday because I found out that it was her birthday on Saturday or Friday. I don't know what time it is over there in Turkey, but apparently she's a great Turkish subscriber and she means a lot. So why don't we all just wish her a happy birthday and she'll be really happy. And everybody who's celebrating a birthday today or any birthday in the future, you know, have a happy birthday. You guys already know I mess up everything, but you know what? I'm human. I'm not going to edit out my mistakes because, you know, I'm not trying to be perfect or anything, but I will try to make you share, comment, like, and subscribe to this video because 30 minutes, who wouldn't want to be a part of this amazing magicalness of infinite proportions? I don't know why it's infinite. It's not infinite because it's going to end eventually. Anyway, guys, you know I don't make sense, and if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing so you can hear more of this nonsense moving forward. Anyway, guys, no, seriously, I'm gonna cut it short only because, I don't know, I feel like this video needs to get up as soon as possible, but you guys know that my my face is really, you know, face-like, and that being said, I'll see you guys later, and comment below what kind of face you want me to have, you know, in the future. I don't know what I'm saying, guys. Good night, good morning, and I'll see you in the next video. I love you guys.